Coming up on this episode of Hollywood Frequency, we're talking about the Law of One raw material and a specific focus on your higher self. Have you ever wondered if you have a guide that guides you from the future? Well, this video is going to get into that. So stay tuned for the specific information after this. The next question that the questioner asked Ra about the higher self says, what I'm trying to understand here is more about the higher self and its relationship with the mind-body-spirit complex. Does the higher self have a sixth density mind-body-spirit complex that is a separate unit from the mind-body-spirit complex that is, in this case, displaced to negative time-space? Ra says, this is correct. The higher self is the entity of the mid-sixth density, which, turning back, offers its service to itself. So as we mentioned earlier, it's a gift it gives itself, so it's offering a service to us. So right now we have a higher self that's willing and able to give us a service of helping us. Isn't that great to know? He goes on, questioner says, I think I have an erroneous concept of the mind-body-spirit complex. For instance, that I represent here in this density and my higher self. The concept probably comes from my concept of space and time. I'm going to try to unscramble it. He says, the way I see it right now is that I'm existing in two different locations. Here, in the third density, and in the mid-sixth density simultaneously. Is this correct? What does Ra say, Byron?
You are existing at all levels simultaneously.
Wow.
Yeah.
How about that?
It is specifically correct that your higher self is you in the mid-sixth density. And in your way of measuring what you know as time, your higher self is yourself in your future.
So there's some interesting things. We are existing in multiple places simultaneously, in multiple densities simultaneously.
Yeah. It is. The
illusion grows.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like when a lot of these nuggets I can kind of like say, I thought that thought before. But when I saw this, I was like, no, I never thought that thought before. It's kind of an original idea for me that the higher self, which I actually believe, and I kind of felt that intuitively, that there is a more evolved part of me. Maybe it's subconscious, or maybe it's an actual physical entity or a spiritual entity. But then when I saw this, I was like, okay, well, maybe it's like existed outside of time. Like as I came into time, a spiritual being, there's a part of me that never came into this that can guide me. But this is actually saying, no, this is you evolved through time, having gone through the same experiences, but all the way evolved and then made it outside of time. And I can access it in time.
Right.
You know.
So it's like it really goes to show our multidimensionality. The levels to this is beyond us. You know, we just see ourselves and we think we have just one life and we're in just one body and that's it. And like this book really changes your thought process completely. Law of One, the raw material. Grab it, read it, love it. Okay, so from there, go ahead and get the next quote started. What did the questioner say at that point?
Yeah. Let's see. I am correct in assuming that all of the mind-body-spirit complexes that exist in the level below the mid-sixth density have a higher self in the mid-sixth density. Is this correct?
And Ra says this is correct. So all mind-body-spirit complexes, you know, that's us here, that exist in the levels below mid-sixth density do have a higher self in mid-sixth density. That's interesting. So it's not selective. It's not like, oh well, if you do this and you do that, you have this higher self. We all have that guide basically helping us, that can help us if we call onto that guide. So the questioner says, would an analogy for this situation be that the individual's higher self is manipulating to some extent, shall I say, the mind-body-spirit complex that is an analog, its analog, you might say, to move through the lower densities for purposes of gaining experience, and then finally transferring that experience or amalgamating it, you might say, in mid-sixth density with the higher self. So I thought this was a really smart observation by the questioner, saying, look, is it then that we have a higher self that's in this future, in the sixth density, and he's gaining experience from us, and he's manipulating things so he can gain more experience, and then eventually incorporating that into his sixth density self? That kind of made sense, but very interesting, the choice of words. See, Ra is very specific. Every word is important. He doesn't brush over anything. And in his answer to this, he specifically goes after one word. He says, look, this is incorrect. The higher self does not manipulate its past selves. Very important. He wants to make sure that we understand that. It protects when possible and guides when asked. It protects when possible and guides when asked. So make sure you ask for your higher self's guidance. But the force of free will is paramount. The seeming contradictions of determinism and free will melt when it's accepted that there is such a thing as true simultaneity. So when we understand that all takes place at once, the sixth density, higher self, us, the whole thing is all at one time, which there's no time, but all in the now, then it all melts. The higher self is the end result of all development experienced by the mind-body-spirit complex to that point. So the lesson in that question and answer from Ra, I believe, is that we have a higher self. Call onto your higher self and ask for guidance. It's not manipulating us. It's there for us, for our help when we call upon it and ask for guidance, and it also does protect us.
Yeah, I always think about that movie, Back to the Future, when I read this part, because it's like the character had already been through that scenario. Then he goes back, then he sees himself. I don't know if you saw Back to the Future.
Of course.
But it was like, it was a really cool, interesting thing to watch as a kid, because it made you kind of think about your future self and going back. This same kind of idea,
right.
The character always very, very careful, because he needed to kind of not disrupt the choices that his past self was making, because he didn't want to unravel a lot of events. Like, he needed to kind of go through that experience and not intervene too much. But certain instances he could.
So he wanted to keep intact the free will of his future self
or his past self.
His past self, right? Exactly like your higher self does, right? He doesn't want to impede your free will, but he wants to guide you where he can. But you have to ask.
Right.
So this is very important. It makes a difference. All right, moving on. The questioner, now we're in 70.12 if you want to find these things. Most of these questions are in the 70s session of channeling, if you ever want to look it up. The questioner says, then what are we looking at? What we're looking at is a long path of experience through the densities up to the mid-sixth density, which are a function totally of free will and result in awareness of the higher self in the mid-sixth density. But since time is illusory and there is, shall I say, unification of time and space, or an eradication of what we think of as time, then all this experience that results in the higher self, the cause of evolvement through the densities, is existing while the evolvement takes place. Since it's all simultaneous, is that correct? Well, there's a mouthful. All right, so Ra so eloquently answers, I am Ra. We refrain from speaking of correctness due to our understanding of the immense difficulty of absorbing the concepts of metaphysical existence. In time/space, which is precisely as much of yourself is in space-time, all times are simultaneous, just as your geography, your cities and your villages are all functioning, bustling, and alive with entities going about their business at once. So it is in time-space with the self. So all things are happening at a simultaneous point. We only see it through the illusion of time. But you're here in the now, and everything is taking place in that moment. So be present, be in the moment, call upon your higher self, and realize it's a gift that you've given yourself so that you can have help, guidance, and protection. And we hope that this helps you to understand your higher self a little better, and that you start calling upon your higher self. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. We appreciate you, and we appreciate your comments if you leave them. Thank you so much. Hollywood Frequency, signing out.